Don't let it stifle you. Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Don't shove it into a cube.
Absolutely.
A cube's not for everyone.
No, correct. And so we don't all fit into those as a brick. We don't fit into a certain mold of bricks. We're entirely different, unique human beings. And I guess it goes back to that realization that if I just figured out a way of what set me apart from everybody else, and I think that was the one thing like that it fell into my lap, even though I was ignoring it, is that I went to a university. I was going to go through that graduate program, and I did a tour of the school. And that professor, Larry Moody, she told me, "You're going to be teaching drawing 1." And I was like, "What are you talking about, woman? You're out of your mind." Like it blew me away that
So
she told me like, "Oh, you'll be great at it." I'm like, "No, I'm not interested. I'm not. This is no."
That's a good thing to point out. You're not an extrovert naturally.
Well, it's not necessarily something that I want to go out beating everybody's door down, because I want to respect their space. At the same time, as age has gone on, I've realized just how I've become, because of that moment, I've become very passionate about teaching, and that teaching is a major part of my artwork. Not only does it help my artwork out, but I've been blessed with a tremendous amount of crappy teachers. Mm-hmm. Not only as colleagues, which I've experienced at the university level, but as well as mentors, as well as teachers that just sucked. Mm-hmm. and sucked my life soul. Mm-hmm. And they were, I look back at that of not as, now I look back at it as like not as moments that where I should keep dwelling on, but just as ammunition to be able to fight the fact of what proper teaching looks like, and what proper mentorship, what proper listening looks like. And man, this whole teaching subject just irks me, because there's so many teachers out there that just
and on the flip side,
nonstop, and it just,
you've had terrible teachers, but then on the flip side, you've had amazing, really mentors, not really just teachers, but amazing mentors. So seeing both sides of that, do you feel that has really affected not just the way you teach, the topics that you teach, because you want to only teach relevant information criteria for the industry, but also like what you said about just having the ability to just listen,
right,
and be kind,
right?
Like that's so key to building any decent relationship.
And I have found by doing that, it has kind of opened me up for a time where there are a few students that see that, and they see that as a vulnerability and try to take advantage of you. Yeah. For their own benefit of just their grade. They're just after that certain letter of grade. They're not after the improvement of the skills that need to be developed. And I thought that was interesting too, that I saw that not only on both sides of really excellent teachers that have helped mentor me along, but or even colleagues for that matter too, but also those that just to the opposite end. And I see that in students too. And so that was the other sort of, I guess, I don't know,
So relationship wise, probably your first motto was just be honest, be open, be honest. With yourself, with others. Well,
and that's the next stage, is not only being honest with, your mentors, hopefully being honest with you, and we've experienced dishonest ones. But then the next level above that, I think, is being honest with yourself. I think that's the hardest hurdle. And there was glimmers of that I've had in my life that have got me to this point. But I think it's looking for any grain of how can I be really honest with myself, brutally honest. And it has allowed myself to have a tremendous amount of freedom, like you were asking about earlier, that freedom to be able to not necessarily worry about all these other details of what this teacher's saying or not saying, or how much or you kind of leave that, because you're so brutally honest with yourself. There almost becomes sort of, not in the rear view mirror, but I don't know quite describe what I'm trying to say, but just that.
Yeah, probably do you feel like there's like a sieve or like a screen? There's like a silk screen that keeps unnecessary information, critiques out of the way, and you're able to pick out from the advice you receive what's the most helpful, what's the most useful, how can I keep getting better, or I've tried that before, or I've been down that road before. Keep going. So what do you believe? So we've looked through your past, and so you've been classically trained artist. You've been through an undergraduate. You have double degrees undergraduate. You have a graduate degree. You I don't know if you've talked to your listeners before that you actually quit a graduate program. You had to fire your professors, and then now you are in a graduate degree program. What do you feel going on your art journey as a professional artist, as growing? What has helped you the most? What changed this time for you going into graduate school, or even deciding to go into graduate school? What has helped you the most on your journey as a professional artist, and not just as a teacher or mentor as you're moving forward?
I'd have to say, first and foremost, a confidence in myself. I think that's one thing that is incredibly crucial. Not necessarily arrogance or pride, but just a confidence in the path that I'm on. Even though I might not necessarily know where that path is going to lead, but being as confident as I can to go on that path. And I think the other part of that is the realization that of, again, being honest with myself has really, those two things have really helped. And even though you brought, all these sort of schools that I've done and that sort of thing, I'm kind of, the flip side is, one side is that school is really great and you meet a lot of good people. On the other flip side is that you do run into those individuals that they don't have the student in mind. They just don't. And then you also have the other problem of school debt, or you have some of those issues, and along with just the overall university experience, where there is, frankly, even at the graduate level, there's a lot of wasted classes. And I guess to answer your question as best I can is that, yes, I think it's important that we have that sense of confidence that we're on the right path, because everyone's journey is obviously different. But I also think there has to be room you have to allow room for to be able to, I guess, like I said earlier, to be able to listen. How listening is so important. We're quick to make judgment, or quick to just open up our mouth and not realize just listening sometimes. And I think if both sides are willing to really listen, I think that's where some really awesome teaching moments can come out of that. And I think that's where, I'm sure I'll ultimately go in with this, but that's kind of just, those are things that are really important to me that have helped me on my journey, along with in graduate school. Is it needed? Not necessarily.
Well, that's a good thing to point out, too, is when you graduated with your undergraduate program, the internet was still in its infancy. I mean, not to age you or anything, but, coming from a generation that didn't have internet until you were in college.
Right.
How do you feel that has, or is, changing education in general, professional development to art education to our university systems?
I think both good and bad. The internet has been awesome because, in a sense, that it is If you can certainly go around the rabbit hole of like who designed the internet and what was the real purpose behind the internet and those sort of things, and go down this rabbit hole of DARPA and all those sort of things, and that's fairly interesting. But from our standpoint, my standpoint, the cool thing about the internet is that you have the opportunity, and I think it was an extension of ourselves, to be able to design our own universe, design our own idea of what information are important to us. And that has definitely been the good thing about the internet. And I think at that point in time when it was first coming on and those sort of things, it was just so brand new that no one quite knew what to do with it or what its purpose was. And just like any other human endeavor, we tend to put things and then let's fit it into these tiny boxes. I mean, what was that called? I always kind of joke. What was it? MySpace. There you go. See, that was the joke. I just tripped myself into it. But MySpace, I always thought it was so stupid because you were literally boxing it yourself into the form that they were giving you. That's why I struggled for a long time with like Facebook or, those Insta wet faces and all those things. I struggled with that, and still to a degree struggle with it, because it's putting you into a box of the definite, and you have to, everything looks the same, everything, you can change the color and you can change a little bit of the wallpaper, but for the most part,
just you're like a cog in the wheel.
You are a cog someone else's wheel, the cog on someone else's universe.
Mm-hmm.
More drastic term might be a ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, in my opinion, I think that's what exactly it is. And so there's this sort of thing and you have other people that say, well, it's more of a funnel, or you need to make, and of course we're kind of jumping ahead in time, but the discussion is it's more of a funnel. It needs to be some sort of thing where we're progressing our overall process
Mm-hmm.
of what we're trying to describe to get people to view certain subjects. Or certain content, and there's sort of a path of being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of interesting in terms of where we are right now.
Someone who's an artist, illustrator, graphic designer, what tips do you have for them who are trying to get in at the professional level?
I think this has taken me years to learn. And I think part of it just because of, in some ways, I may have been sheltered, way overly sheltered, in part because of my reading difficulties. But we all have difficulty in one form or another. Some major crutch that just keeps kicking us. I think one of the things that I think is the most important of making the jump from just someone that, I guess to say it this way, I don't know everything, but I can tell you that at the same time that there have been instances in my life that if I put all these things together, I've gained a tremendous amount of experience in terms of my business knowledge and being a part of several amazing companies that have either been in a startup area or really good companies, and then they kind of fall apart. I've been a part of those kind of experiences, and those are really helpful. And I think out of all of those, the biggest thing that I think is important is if you're ever making the jump from just sort of amateur to professional, or you're making the jump to try to get commissions or some sort of way of monetizing the work that you're doing, I think the biggest thing is treating yourself seriously.
That's a great tip.
Too often, I think we don't treat ourselves seriously. Like, well,
as a professional,
I can't do that because, well, I don't have time. I have another job. I have all these other things. One of the things that we did when I was at Apple, near the end of the time I was at Apple, there's several of us that were just kind of frustrated with things, and we were like, well, let's just get a group together and talk about art, and each week we do an art critique and talk about what each other's doing, it's kind of funny, even though we didn't necessarily all end up, quote unquote, in the art field in one form or another, all of us at least were pushing beyond our bounds of what we thought we could do at that moment. And that really gave, in part, me, I can't speak for the other guys, but it gave me just a feeling that, okay, how serious do I want to treat this to ultimately be able to do that? And then I was fortunate enough to land into several jobs in a row that gave me really good education just in real life, not necessarily school, to be able to move to those next steps. I mean, just silly things like the importance of expense sheets, the importance of return on time, or ROT, return on investment, ROI, those sort of things. And I know that sounds really businessy kind of mindset, but it really shifted that, yes, I can be creative, but I can also be have an incredible business mindset and keep pursuing that business mindset, and not just sort of, well, I'm a creative artist, that's where I'll be. It's near impossible to make a living at this.
Well, that's a question too that I would bring up too, is where do you think the inherent guilt comes from in the artistic world, I guess, where it seems like the thought of many is that you should feel guilty asking for money for your work, but then on the other hand, you have Hollywood and have globally known artists who are making millions of dollars and they don't feel guilty. So, yeah, where do you think the disparity comes between that?
I think a large part of that guilt source comes from the only place I can really find it and solidify it, and it is really the university system. And I know I'm kind of picking on them by saying that, just really hitting them in the eye. But I really do think it is the case, because this sort of idea that I can only be an artist unless I'm a part of the university system in one form or another. I can only be an artist if I'm going to do lectures and tours and those sort of things at university exercises or experiences. One of the things that, when you mentioned earlier that I went to a school and completely fired that graduate program because it was a waste of my time. And again, being honest with myself, I had to be honest with myself, even though it was hard. Man, it was a waste of my time. They were not invested not only in the evolution of who I was, they just weren't invested in the overall idea that it was more along the lines of postmodern, that let's just confuse the hell out of you and you have no purpose to your life. You're just a speck of paint on the wall. That's your only endeavor. If you want to be just a speck of paint on the wall, then you'll be happy as a lamb. But that doesn't convey anything. Again, like back to stories, it doesn't convey anything of value to who you are and what your art really is about. And I think that at the university program, a lot of artists would be coming in, to explain my point, a lot of artists would be coming in and they just from outside, and they were professionals or professional critiques people or whatever they were. And they were just talking really out of the side of their mouth, or to be honest, out of their butt. They were just making it up and having fun doing it.
How do you get that job?
Right, kind of a cool gig, and so they were getting paid by that. Mm-hmm. And I think that was even though it was sort of a low moment of like, why are we discussing these stupid topics that really don't mean anything? It also gave me kind of a step in terms of, okay, if art is heading this way, I don't want to be a part of it. And I think that's why I partly made that conscious decision of like, you're fired. I'm not wasting my time with you.
Which is also known as dropping out. And I think a lot of people see that as inherently a failure. However, especially with today's day and age, it is much more acceptable to discontinue a course if it is not the right direction for you.
Right.
So kudos to you on that. That takes courage, to say, well, and you, in your case, individually, you were sat down and told specifically that not to go to college. It wasn't even a possibility for you. You
Yeah,
went.
so that's become sort of a chip on my shoulder that I've been told several times. Don't waste your time with college. Don't waste your time with graduate school. Don't waste your time with the current graduate school that I'm going. It's become sort of a chip on my shoulder to say, no, okay, I will.
But
And
then
I think
at
if
some
I
point,
would, in some point in time,
it becomes like the adults in Peanuts, and you just don't listen to them anymore.
absolutely. And I think that's kind of where I am now, that the skills that I'm going to from the school I'm going to now have been tremendous. Overall, I would have to say that the teachers have been excellent. That said, I think the biggest difference was my attitude. I came into the situation that I wasn't going to take any prisoners.
You were more educated as well.
Well,
You have experience.
Not that I was being arrogant about it, or I just was, or being flippant on it. I was
You were
just
more wise. I would say you were more wise
probably
with how you selected. You paid attention to who the professors were.
Not only that, but even though I've had sort of mediocre professors and I've had all that at this school. I think the biggest thing is my attitude was very much that I don't care how crappy you are, or how great you are, or what compliment or what badgering you give to me. I'll take what I need from you, and then I'm taking that experience and I want to develop my own world from all this experience that I've gained. I want to develop my own world and share that with others so that they can then do the same, and in part so they don't waste their time. But the hard part with that is I run into artists that it's almost as if, kind of a weird way, that I'm talking to myself, my 20-year-old self or 18-year-old self, and they just kind of, whatever, to me, even though I'm talking like I'm giving my 18-year-old self this amazing advice, my best advice that I've gained over years of experience, and they just sort of, whatever. But I've gained through that, even that happening, of just sort of like, my 18-year-old self ignoring my current self, that it's almost made me just sort of keep trying harder to keep pushing this information out to people that are ready to soak this up and receive it in a new way that is valuable to them.
TikvahMinds.com